Hello, everyone, and welcome to our paid growth session today. We're joined by Michael Taylor and Savannah Sanchez. I'll do some introductions here, and then we'll get right into it. Michael Taylor founded Ladder, a 50-person growth marketing agency that worked with Booking.com, Monzo Bank, and Timeout. He's writing Marketing Memetics, a book applying concepts from evolutionary biology to creative strategy and testing. And then we got Savannah Sanchez here, who's a TikTok media buying and ad creative expert. She works directly with a handful of e-commerce brands to give them top-tier ad creatives and manages campaigns across various social channels. So great folks to have in the room today to talk about paid growth. In terms of kicking things off, what I'd love to get is both of your perspectives, and maybe we'll start with Savannah, on how you feel paid growth has perhaps changed over the past couple of years. I think there's been a lot of changes and a lot of things to dive into, but it's definitely a very different game than it was, let's say, back in 2016, 17, when I was hands on keyboard, running campaigns myself. So I'd love to talk about, get both of your perspectives on how the game's kind of changed over the past year or two. And maybe we'll start with you, Savannah.
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah, I mean, tons of changes. I'd say the first and biggest one being iOS 14, changing the way that media buyers approach ad accounts. Like you were saying, back in 2016, 2017, even 2018, it was a lot more about manual media buying tactics, like changing bidding strategies, testing a lot of audiences, trying to find efficiencies that way. Where now, especially after iOS 14, it's all about how can we keep the account structure simple? How can we focus on creative testing? And brands are really trying to understand that the most important thing when seeing success on Meta or TikTok ads is the quality of the creatives and getting like that testimonial, like authentic UGC style ads. That's really been a major shift in the industry over the last year or two, where that's become a larger priority than it used to be.
Yeah, for sure. Like I've seen the same thing, and yeah, good to be here as well. So I remember when I started ad buying, my special power was that I was like one of the few people in the room that knew how to use Excel, and that's not really a special power anymore. Unfortunately, I had to learn how to do creative testing, and actually pretty early on, I think Savannah, you did a ton of content on the importance of creative testing that we read in our agency. And we just saw that was where the alpha was. That's where over the past few years, anyone who got quick learnings from the creative were ahead of the game. And now I think a lot of the kind of optimization stuff that we used to be able to get an edge from just has gone away.
So then media buyers need to also be creative marketers as well. So a bit of a shift there. Creative testing is a very interesting topic, and there's a lot of different ways to test creative and a lot of different approaches to it. The audience here is mostly earlier stage startups. Would love to get both of your perspectives on how to think about like starting your creative testing, right? Like how to think about like, I'm gonna turn on TikTok ads or Meta ads for the first time. What should I be thinking about to approach creative testing on these platforms?
Sure, I'll tackle that one first. So I do lots of video ads for new brands, and typically what I like to do, because I'm not a risk taker at heart, and I think that's probably part of being a good media buyer, is like taking calculated risks, but knowing like which risks to take. And when it comes to creatives, especially for a new brand, I always like to go for the tried and true, proven formats. Like it's not really the time to be, I would say, like super creative, innovative, but rather really study like what the larger brands on Meta and TikTok are doing in terms of what hooks are they using, what formats are they using, what's the length of the videos, what style are they using. Really become a student of what the top spenders on these platforms are doing and try to recreate that for your own brand. So there's no need to reinvent the wheel and really try to think something creative or out there. Of course, like as you keep testing and you want to expand beyond your core videos, it's great to do that. But when you're first getting started, really study what your competitors are doing and what the large brands in the space are doing, and try to copy some of those formats so that you can take a calculated risk of relying off of what's already in on the platform as opposed to trying something completely brand new.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think you need to get to average first, right? You can't get to excellent creative straight off the bat. I mean, you don't even know, like, how many thousands of creatives of like we tested, and then you just can't predict which ones are actually going to work half the time. So I think best thing is to take a look at what other people are doing, what's working for them. If they're in your category, that's great because that's what the consumers expect. You want to see kind of what memes come up essentially. By memes I mean, like, is it are they kind of grabbing the attention the first few seconds of the video, or are they showing a product shot first, or these sorts of things that that you can, these patterns that you can spot that repeat throughout the different creatives that you've looked at. So kind of build a swipe file up of from the ad library. What have you seen, what is interesting, what's being used, and then just try and emulate that as much as possible. And then once you start to get at least average performance, then I think it's time for taking that leap above.
So sticking with the earlier stage startups for a moment, and kind of getting into creative testing, creative production budgets tend to be a little lower when you're starting off, right? And I think if you're,
there usually isn't a budget, right?
Or there isn't a budget.
It's usually
at
just
all.
like me, like someone who's not creative,
right,
trying to mess around in Canva.
So what are some of the approaches you've taken to get to video ads? Because I've heard you both say testing videos, and where in the video does this happen or that happen, and so video is obviously an important format. How do you start putting together video ads when your superpower used to be a spreadsheet?
With this
the mighty iPhone.
mighty iPhone, it is never easier to create great video ads with zero budget. If you have an iPhone, you can create great video ads. I would say that how I got started was making UGC brands. Like, they would send me products, I would film at my house, testimonial videos of me using it, showing it in good lighting. Of course, if you don't want to be on camera, maybe enlisting some friends or coworkers to start this process. You don't have to hire influencers or models straight off the bat, but just do it yourself. And using the iPhone apps to edit videos. So one of my favorite apps that I still use to this day is called CapCut. It's made by the makers of TikTok, ByteDance. So it has all the native TikTok fonts. It's super easy to edit, and you can even get CapCut on your desktop now if you want to edit it there. So filming on your iPhone plus CapCut is the easiest way to get started and get quality ads that even the top brands are doing. They're making stuff on their phone and using these type of apps to get their video ads up.
Yeah, like we actually, when we were doing the ads for Monzo Bank, like, this was at a time when they were growing really fast. They were just about to do TV advertising. They actually had like a whole team of really clever, talented designers. But that team was busy doing the TV campaign. We literally just like rounded up a few people in the office that looked like they would be Monzo Bank users. And they were actually, so that was helpful. And then we went to like the local pizza joint, bought a pizza for them, and then we filmed loads of times. Like, one of the big features of the phone was of the app was that you could split the bill between all of your friends automatically. It would work out the differences of like who owed what. So we just like filmed them like splitting the bill after the pizza. And we actually got some really good creative that outperformed some of the TV stuff. So and we didn't cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that.
Mm-hmm. And let's kind of go forward a bit. Bit of a later stage company. Maybe it's Series A, Series B, a lot more reliance on paid media as a growth channel. How do you approach scaling creative production, right? I remember one of my biggest challenges when I was a media buyer was just like not having enough access to volumes of creative. And as brands grow, they tend to be a little bit more protective of the brand, where you used to be able to just run around with your iPhone and make stuff with folks in the office.
Yeah.
Now, all of a sudden, they're a bit more risk averse to that sort of approach. Things got to get approvals and what have you. How have you both approached scaling creative as you've required it in kind of scaling these channels?
Sure. Well, I think one thing, is that these bigger brands, I think, especially over the last year, are realizing like how big of a force TikTok is and that people like this type of short form, raw style video. So more and more are they becoming accepting that this type of format that we need to have in our media toolkit. So I would say for the larger brands, it's not just relying off the UGC TikTok style video, which we all know to perform really well, also diversifying it with higher quality video production and studio shots, still videos, founder or still images, like high quality founder videos. So having a larger toolkit of the variety of the type of ads that they're doing, they're not just relying off TikTok style UGC. But I have noticed in the last year, brands are in the bigger ones that previously have very brand guidelines and want things to look very polished are now realizing that if we want to reach the younger generation and be on TikTok and get on these new channels, that we have to kind of fit content in with what people are used to seeing on these channels. No one wants to see a perfectly polished commercial on TikTok. They're going to realize this is an ad and they're going to swipe away instantly. So you have to make it look raw and native and look like it's just a regular TikTok if you want to succeed on that. That's something that I've seen with my clients last year or so.
Yeah, like one of the things we found useful at the agency was building like what we call the creative lake. So basically, a lot of like pre-approved ideas and concepts, and kind of even specific executions of those concepts, and then being able to like piece those things together. So like the biggest level of approval you need to get from the client, I think, or your boss if you're in house, is to just like get them to approve concepts and not executions. Because if you're approving every single execution, you're going to be like waiting for weeks to put new creative live, and legal will get involved. And yeah, actually I had like one client where it would take 3 months to get approval because they're in the financial services team, and and every time we did approval, it would, like the call with the lawyers would cost them like a couple of grand at least.
Right.
So the only way you can like manage that and retain your sanity is to get them to approve like not the final ad, like how everything is cut together, but like, you know, are you okay with this shot? Like, are you okay with like this stock photo? You know, are you okay with this line of copy? You know, you have to retain ownership over how you're going to piece those things together. And if you can do that, then you can create as many variations as you like. You know, even with just like a small team, you can create thousands of variations, and like that's way more than you'd even get to test unless you're spending a huge amount of money.
Mm-hmm. How do you so speaking about, you know, testing thousands of variations, how do you think about your testing strategy and getting to that point where you're testing thousands of variations and trying to quantify all of that? Like, I'd love to dive into that, right? When things kind of they progress and they get increasingly more and more complicated, how do you start to think about that, especially considering you both alluded to the fact that, you know, where paid media has gone now is, you know, the opportunity for improvement is going to really rely heavily on the creative side. So as you continue to get more and more sophisticated, how do you think about your testing strategy in a world where you're testing thousands of iterations?
You know, I'm not someone that likes to test thousands of iterations, even for clients that I'm working on where they're spending over $1 million on paid media a month. We're testing maybe 2 to 4 new concepts a week. So I know some companies will do the thousands of iterations methodology. Like the more we put out, the more chances of something sticking. But I always like to think about it in terms of what is feasible in the budget. Of course, like creating thousands of a month is going to be very expensive. So what can we fit in the budget? And if we can really strategize 4 great videos a week and rely on past data in terms of what hooks are working best, what's working well for other clients, and really come up with 4 concepts that we think are really strong. I always think that's a better approach rather than trying to do thousands of iterations per month. 2 to 4 is what I've found is a sweet spot for what I like to do with my clients in terms of new ads, just prioritizing quality over quantity. Because if you do get that one really great ad, there's ads that we've been running for over a year on TikTok and Facebook that's still the best performer or one of the top performers. So if you can get those ads with a really long lifespan, that in my opinion is worth pursuing more than I want 1,000 different variables in the ad account. And then also the manpower, even if it's even possible to analyze 1,000 different variables of these are slight changes we made over all these hundreds of iterations. And this is why it's important. I think just analyzing that becomes too much of a task and perhaps not even meaningful if you can't get significant spend on every variable. Like saying, oh, this ad had a $1 CPA, but it only spent $10 doesn't really mean
Yeah.
anything. I'd rather spend $5,000 on one variation and be able to say it's statistical significance. Okay, I see this data, I'm getting this click-through rate, this thumbs up rate, the CPA, rather than trying to have way too big a sample size for analyzing.
Yeah, I think it's definitely moved more that way as well. Like we used to be able to get away with testing thousands of variations, even for like relatively low spend. We'd kind of like with statistical significance, you can, it's a function of like how much data you have, but also how big the effect is, right? So what we would do is we'd trash like lots of variations quite early. If it didn't like move the needle in like, like if it didn't even get a click for the first $10, then it's probably not going to get like a $1 CPC, right? And if it's not going to get a $1 CPC, then the conversion rate would have to be enormous for us to hit our CAC target. So you can trash the variations pretty quickly and move aggressively through them. I usually only recommend doing a lot of variations if you have no idea what's working, or if you're like really far away from your target. Like if you're like if this is like your last month with the client before they fire you because you're not hitting numbers, or actually like with us, like we had over 200 clients and a lot over the 6 years, and like so many of those clients had never done paid ads before, and like they weren't even sure if it would work for their business. And so a lot of what we do is to try and quickly figure out if it was worth pursuing. I mean, I think you can make paid ads work for any business eventually, but like there is an opportunity cost, right? Like it's a distraction if like you could grow better through SEO or through something else, right? So that's the only scenario where I think you should be that aggressive. I think, and even when you are testing lots of variations, you're not really like A/B testing them necessarily, right? What we tend to do is like only really A/B test the concept level. So if it's like a really big change, so like going back to the Monzo Bank example, like a lot of the users wanted them because they had like really cheap foreign exchange within the app, and then like commission free, and then a lot of users wanted to use them for their bill splitting function, which I talked about a minute ago, and then there were like 2 or 3 other concepts, and we just like weren't sure what was most important. They were important to different groups of people in some cases, right? So that's when like an A/B test makes sense, and you want to like run the test for 2 weeks to make sure that there's not seasonality, and you want to you want to figure out like the statistical significance and actually kind of make sure there's a big difference between them. But then once you have the concept, then when we're adding more variations, it's usually just like we're just like putting them in the same ad set and kind of letting Facebook decide specifically. So that a lot of people don't like that approach because then like the problem that you run into is like Facebook decides too soon and they don't give the new variations a chance. But like if those variations are like relatively cheap to produce and they're all like very similar to the main concept that is working, then a cost of a additional variation production is very cheap. So you're only kind of making small differences, and we found that really extends the life of a good concept in some cases. They might get tired of seeing exactly the same ad again and again, and maybe there's some algorithmic bias on Facebook's behalf of like showing the same ad for a long time. But if you're making small variations, then Facebook doesn't necessarily know that that's like basically the same ad, right? And like people will see small differences and kind of in their heads it'll be like slightly different, even though the punchline is very similar. So I think like that's this is like you really don't need to worry about this at all unless you're spending like at least hundreds of thousands a month. You could basically just like put 1 or 2 new ads live a week, and you'd be fine from most accounts. Like most advertising accounts don't spend that much. So this is only really when you're like scaling aggressively, and we were doubling budgets every 2 weeks at the time with Monzo. So it's like then we had to like go really, really aggressive. But that's like wartime. That's not normal peacetime.
Cool. I've been noticing a few questions in the Q&A section around platforms, right? What platform is best for this? When should I think about, going all in on one platform versus diversifying? Would love to get perhaps your thoughts on how you think about different platforms, perhaps for different use cases, right? So maybe let's start off with something like TikTok, right? It's an emerging platform. I think it's even for a lot of experienced performance media buyers, it's still fairly new in terms of like what does performance look like in TikTok. Would love to get your both of your perspectives on like how to approach TikTok as a platform effectively, when to use it, who should use it. Would love to selfishly pick your brains on that.
Actually, Savannah, I wanted to ask on that. Like, are you all in on TikTok now? Because I know you were really early on Snapchat ads, and like I think maybe you started with like Facebook, Instagram ads as well. Have you like focused purely on TikTok because it's working so well, or is it you do still do a little bit of everything?
I would say Snapchat I used to love, and iOS 14 really killed it, at least for my clients. Like we really stopped seeing efficiencies on that platform after. And that's just kind of how this is with paid social. Like you have like the always changing, the algorithms are changing, people's behavior is changing. Like TikTok use rates just spiking over the last year or two, where you have to adapt. So I would say my clients, their channel distribution has changed so much over the last couple years, where it used to be more heavily on Snapchat and Pinterest. Now they're maybe 50% on Meta, 50% on TikTok. I still don't have any clients that are primarily on TikTok. Say most people, the split is either 50-50 Facebook, Instagram versus TikTok, or there's even more of a percentage on Facebook. So I think it's still important to focus on Meta ads, and that's still like the largest distribution channel. For TikTok, I would say if your product is under $100, then that's really the sweet spot for TikTok. From my clients, we've seen that it's very much like impulse buys. TikTokers sales, promotions, like accessories, beauty, home. I think under $100 is really the sweet spot. And it's definitely not just for teenagers. Like we're seeing really good TikTok results for like women 50 plus on home goods and different stuff like that. So it has a really large demographic on TikTok now. I think price is really the most important thing when it comes to TikTok because they want impulse buys and they're really price sensitive. That's what I've been noticing over the past particular.
So
no six-figure SaaS companies then, probably not the best.
Not yet. It'll happen though. Like, I mean, like people used to say the same. I remember I was like doing like Google ads. That was my first job, was doing Google ads for clients. And Facebook came out, and the number one thing every client said was, "Oh, my customers aren't on Facebook." And eventually that became not true. But there was an arbitrage opportunity for a while where they actually were on Facebook, but nobody was targeting them, right? Like, and yeah, we even had some success with like a really large B2B client where their target customer were in the procurement department of like a corporation that had at least 5,000 employees. That was their, ICP. So you wouldn't expect, necessarily to be able to target them, on Facebook, and definitely the quality, like the average percentage of people who are qualified leads was much lower than LinkedIn, where they were mostly advertising. But like the cost was much cheaper than LinkedIn. So on average, like if you throw away those low quality leads, then the cost per quality lead was great. So I think there's probably like, it feels similar now to me, like TikTok, like I'm on TikTok, right? And I could buy SaaS software, right? Like, there's tons of people on TikTok that don't necessarily even tell you that they're, that they like TikTok, right? Because it's maybe a little bit embarrassing, especially with like, I think initially it was all like people dancing, right? And it was just like, not really like the vibe that me as like a, a 36-year-old dad like wants to give off, right? But like now I think like I know there's like Excel tutorials on TikTok, right? There's like jokes and memes that like appeal to everyone, right? There's like news on TikTok. Like I've seen a bunch of like breaking news I've seen like on TikTok first, even before Twitter, which is for the past 5 years it's been Twitter first. So I think it's changing pretty quickly, and there's probably already an arbitrage opportunity.
Mm-hmm. So when do you think it's a good time for advertisers to start diversifying channels, right? Like let's say you're on Facebook and Instagram and that ecosystem's working quite well for you. Like what would be the appropriate signal or time for you to diversify and start trying other channels versus trying to just do more where you are right now?
Yeah, I can take that. It's I think it's about like how desperation in a way. If you're like if you're a new brand and you can't really afford like if you try Facebook ads and it's not it's not Meta ads, I should say. I keep calling it Facebook, but if you try it and it's working okay, but it's like not going to get you to Series A. And like you need something, like you need some edge, you need some leverage. There is like at least an opportunity to try a new channel and like dominate that channel before it gets saturated, because once everyone figures out the channel, then it gets expensive, right? And it's very, very hard unless you have something that's very unique about your product that matches that channel. It's like very, very hard to compete. Or if you have a very good media buyer, right? Or a creative team. But yeah, so I think there's an opportunity when like you're a small player and like you can't quite make the economics work on the main kind of saturated channels. And if you're in that situation, you also don't need that much scale, right? Like if you get 100 new customers this week, that's going to be great, whereas if you're Unilever, right, like you need millions of customers before you even get out of bed. So I think like that's useful. I think the other situation is like when you do have a channel that's working really, really well, but it's starting to mature and you're reaching the ceiling, like you're reaching diminishing returns with that channel. And then you're kind of looking for your act two. And you're not going to turn that channel off. It's still going to be probably 80% of your budget. But if you're not like at least experimenting with other channels with like 10, 15%, 20% of your budget, then you might run the risk of hitting that ceiling and like then starting to miss your targets.
If I agree with everything there. I would say I don't know a brand that's not listing TikTok right now, at least on a small scale. Everyone's curious, like, can we get additional efficiencies here? Have we maxed out on who we can reach on Facebook and we need to buy something new? So everyone's testing it to start. And like I said before, like if you have a product under $100, I would say you should definitely be testing it, especially along with Facebook. Facebook's gonna be a lot more expensive, sure, more competition. So if you can figure out TikTok while it's still really cheap, and your audience is there, I think that's the strategy I would take, at least spending 50-50 on each channel if I was just getting started.
Yeah. Usually though, what you find is if you like, I've seen this across almost every single brand, is like the 80-20 rule, like the Pareto rule. Like almost always you have like one channel that dominates it drives almost all of your growth, and then you have like one other channel that drives 15%, and then the rest of the channels make up the other 5. So it's like it's very, very hard to escape that rule. It's possible, right? Like I've seen people do it, but usually despite your best efforts, most brands are reliant on just one channel.
How do you think about, and maybe I'll direct this one for Michael at first. How do you think about attribution right now? And I guess to be more specific, because obviously it's a big topic, how do you think about like awareness, right? Top of funnel investments versus kind of demand capture, more bottom funnel. And how do you think about attribution between the two? And should I invest in awareness? A lot of our audience is earlier stage startups. Obviously, they want to make sales. They only, want to spend money where it's going to have an ROI, positive return for them. But, if nobody's heard of you, that might be difficult. So how do you think about navigating that and thinking through attribution?
Yeah, so like this is like my favorite topic because since iOS 14, everyone it's wide open, right? Like nobody knows what they're doing. We're all trying to figure it out, and it's there's suddenly a ton of room for creativity in how you do this, and there's a lot of advantage to be had, I think, if you do figure it out. And nobody has, right? Like nobody's figured out attribution yet, and if they tell you they have, then they're probably lying. Um, so so I think roughly the way you should be thinking about it. So one of the questions you asked was like brand, kind of awareness versus performance. And I think that's if you talk to a traditional marketer, like a traditionally educated, like qualified marketer, which I am not, they would tell you, read the long and the short of it, like Les Binet and Peter Field. It's like this seminal paper that everyone quotes that nobody's read, and that tells you like you should spend roughly like I think it's like 60% on branding and then 40% on performance. But in reality, I like the bottoms up approach. I think go for the low hanging fruit first. If someone is searching for your product, you probably want to do Google Ads first because that's the very lowest, bottom of the funnel thing. Those people definitely want the type of thing that you sell. So if you can at least get that running, like maybe you can't beat the rest of the competition there, but like those are going to be the most qualified customers, and they're going to be also ready to buy like right now. So that's going to give you a lot of immediate feedback, which is useful. So that's usually the first thing. If nobody's searching for your product because you sell like I don't know, like hipster neckties or whatever, and nobody searches for that, then you do need to go a little bit more kind of to your audience and interrupt them essentially. Like you can't wait for them to search for you. So that's when you look at like the midterm kind of social networks. Like that's when you're looking at meta ads and you're looking at like TikTok and stuff. Like that's the type of product where if you see it, then you want to you do want to buy it, or if you see it a few times, eventually you'll buy it, right? And that's kind of midterm. And then I think that is interesting because there is like a branding component to it. Not all of the impact is going to be felt like the day that you run the ad. And if you show the ads enough, like to the same audience, eventually you'll start to get more and more direct traffic is how you'll see it come through. And that is attributable back in some form to those ads. And that's where you kind of get into things like marketing mix modeling, which is the new craze, the savior of iOS 14, but also incredibly difficult to do. And then you're looking at also like long-term brands. So performance channels tend not to. They do have some brand effect, but not a huge amount. Most of their impact is felt in the short or medium term. But then if you are growing, you're kind of becoming a bigger brand, and then you do start to do more brand type things, right? So you might do a PR stunt, or you might do a TV ad, or you might sponsor billboards, or like for me, like branding, like for my consultancy, like branding is like writing blog posts because they very rarely lead directly to leads. But every now and again I get someone who's like, oh, I've been reading your blog for 4 months, and now I finally have the budget to reach out. And so I think like you can invest in brand awareness early on. It's very, very difficult to attribute the performance of brand though. So I would say like exhaust the low hanging fruit first, and then the medium hanging fruit, and then the stuff at the top of the tree.
Love
Anything to
that.
add there, Savannah?
Yeah. Don't know if medium hanging fruit is a real thing, but you get that.
It is now. You can coin it. There you go.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Do you think, just one last one on the topic of attribution, because it's a topic that comes up at least it came up all the time with me, particularly when I was focusing on paid. When do you think it really matters, and like how much attention and energy to spend on it versus it starting to actually get in the way of you doing things? Because I think that there was particularly just working with startups, there's this idea that you can actually get a true picture of everything, and they start off with that starting point, and you can't, and you might not do things you should be doing because you can't measure it, and you might be getting in your own way because of the topic of attribution. So how do you think about that? How do you have that conversation with clients? And I imagine you've both experienced the same thing. So we'd love to get your take on like how much attribution is enough versus too much, and spending too much time and energy on it.
Yeah,
What do you
I'll,
normally
I'll,
do with
I'll
yours, Savannah? I was gonna,
go
yeah,
ahead.
that was interesting seeing how you do it.
Oh, sure, sure. So, I like to take a very basic approach to attribution. One thing that I like to look at is the market efficiency ratio, which is
Mm,
essentially your entire site-wide revenue, regardless of what channel it's from, divided by your total ad spend across channels. So typically brands will say like, okay, I want to make sure that my revenue is at least 4 times my ad spend on any given month. And in that ratio, we are profitable. Not necessarily they're trying to pinpoint exactly what channel it came from, because like we said, there's so many marketing activities you do that you can't attribute like specifically to like this Instagram story, you did this post, you did this blog, you wrote this email. But ultimately, all those efforts combined, you want to make sure in any given month that my total ad spend was only a fourth of my online revenue so that you're profitable. That's really the North Star for most brands, is not necessarily caring exactly where it came from. One thing that's helped clarify that is post-purchase surveys. That's something I'm a huge believer in. There's a great shopping app called Faring, formerly Inquire.
yeah,
I'm not sponsored. I just love them. And it's literally like something I look at for every single client. It's just at the end of when someone purchases something, they're asked, how did you hear about us? And they can type, or they select Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, email, influencer. And we find that 50% of people will fill out the survey, like of all customers. So you get a really large sample size. And then you can see, okay, 20% of my customers this month said they found me through TikTok. Cool. And what I found is, especially for TikTok, where the attribution and pixel tracking is not exact, to say the least, I would say it captures maybe half of all purchases that actually come through. We can spend on TikTok because we're validated from these post survey results that actually we have this much revenue and this percentage of people saying that they found us through TikTok. Whereas on TikTok Ads Manager, our CPA is way higher and we have way less customers than we thought we did. So the post purchase survey often validates that this channel is looking better than we thought. And if we did have that, then we'd probably spend a lot less on TikTok, because if we're just relying off what the platforms say, probably just shut it off because it's going to look terrible. That's how I like to look at it.
yeah, I think that's smart. Yeah, like, I mean, I would say like I'm like an attribution junkie. Like I've done like really complex stuff, and like learned how to build like marketing mix models and all this stuff. But actually, when I do attribution, I keep it very simple. Like I think some clients obviously need really complicated stuff, but by and large, I think if you've got some kind of directional steering from your tracking pixel, you kind of understand in real time like this is getting more traction than that, right? Like I put this ad live and it's really bombing, and you don't need to like wait for the marketing mix model, or like even look at the survey results half the time, right? You can see it pretty quickly. But then I think surveys are definitely underrated. Actually, I know Faring as well. Like I did a guest post on their blog recently, yeah, and it's just a great tool. Like I mean, there are obviously other survey providers, right? Like I'm not sponsored either, but I think in general, like if you don't have a survey that shows up after someone buys something or after someone signs up on your website, then you're really missing a trick, because something like most of the websites I look at, like 60% of the traffic is direct, and especially if you're spending a lot on video ads, right? And those video ads are gonna, people not necessarily gonna click on them, right? Like they're gonna like watch them and see them like a few times and then go, what was that brand again? Okay, let me just search their name, right? And they're gonna come through either like through branded SEO, or they're gonna come through direct, or maybe friends will kind of share links in WhatsApp, right? And that comes through direct as well. So I think there's this whole bucket of traffic, and it's your biggest source of traffic that you don't know anything about unless you're doing surveys. One thing I would say is that tends to bias towards more memorable channels. So if you are doing a lot of video, it will give credit to video because that's what people remember. And sometimes it will like bias against things like Google ads, which are a lot less memorable, and people like forget that they clicked on the Google ad. But that's fine, because all the other attribution methods are usually biased against video ads, right? So like Google gets too much credit when you're just looking at UTMs. So yeah, I think the key after iOS 14 is really to do multiple methods, and you don't have to make it very complicated. It's just a case of looking at the tracking data for kind of a directional steer to optimize, and then looking at server data. Maybe doing some linear regression, like marketing mix modeling stuff once you're spending more, and maybe doing like an experiment, like switch it off for a few weeks, switch it back on again, see what the difference is. And that's probably like good enough for 90% of brands.
Okay, we're coming up to time, so I got a couple more questions for y'all, and then we'll start to wrap it up. But we're in Q4 now. If you buy media, this is a particularly expensive time to be buying media. What tips do you have for Q4 2022 for our audience?
TikTok. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I would say, like, of course, leaning into sale messaging, gifting messaging. We're starting with that now, like already making ads saying, this is the perfect gift for your mom, for your best friend. Here's gift ideas under $30. I would advertise now, because right now is cheaper, of course, than 2 weeks leading up to Black Friday. Every week that goes by, it's going to get more and more expensive. So start getting that brand awareness now and get people thinking about your product as a gift. Don't wait until a week before Black Friday to let people know that you're having a promotion or a sale, or that this is a gift. Like, start planting that seed today.
Yeah. Do you know what? Like, this is the advice. Like, it sounds obvious, right? But so many clients I saw this. Like, if you're not involved in Black Friday, like if you aren't in a D2C space, like turn your ads off. Like, you just don't want to be in the market right now. Like, or at least dial them down. Because I see so many brands and they're like, well, no, we budgeted like $1.2 million for the year, so we're going to spend $100,000 a month, regardless of whether it's like Black Friday or like February when nobody is advertising, right? So I would say, like, if it's like, be aware of what else is going on in the market, and if you're a travel company, like actually it's January and February that they're like the big times, and if you're not a travel company, like, then maybe January would be expensive to advertise as well. So yeah, I would say, like, think about it, and usually there's like diminishing returns to this, right? So yes, it's more expensive during Black Friday, but like that depends on your volume, right? So like, if you need to deploy like $12 million this month, then you're gonna have to win every auction, right? Like, you're gonna have to try and win as much inventory as possible, and therefore your costs are gonna be sky high. But like, if you've got realistic targets and you don't need to, like, you don't need to deploy the spend, and you've just got like a sensible kind of profit margin to deal with, you can just dial down the volume, right? So yes, you won't like sell as much during Black Friday, but like, if that's profitable sales, that's better for the brand most of the time than just like emptying your warehouse of inventory and selling all that stuff at a discount as well. So you're probably losing a ton of money. So it depends on the brand, and not every brand can be that flexible. But if it's like your business, then be wiser about how you do it. Or if you're cozy with the client, you can kind of explain this to them and help them navigate this period, rather than just like default thinking, hey, we got to hit this target, so we have to basically ignore all of these other things that are going on.
Perfect. Thank you. Everybody loves tools. What are your essential paid growth tools that you use on a regular basis, or you would recommend for people to check out? I know we had one in the Shopify ecosystem that we touched on. We can't recall the name of that. Which one was it, Savannah? That's it. Yeah. What other tools are essential to you in your work and paid growth?
Should have got some sponsors for this.
I know.
I'm just kidding.
I am already sponsored. I will just like wear any flag that people send me. So just send me stuff.
I keep it pretty simple. Like I said, I like the post-purchase survey for faring. Most of my clients will use some sort of third-party attribution tracking platform like Triple Whale, which is great for reporting. Same with Northbeam, that's another popular one. But honestly, like what I do is most of the video ad side and creating the UGC. So most of my tools like CapCut and like Adobe After Effects and Dropbox, like my and then Trello for project management. So because it's more on the video side, it's not necessarily the tactical Shopify apps, but I'm sure mine has some good ones to recommend.
Yeah, do you know what? Like, I'm kind of on the other end of the spectrum in that, like, half the stuff that I want to mess around with, they don't exist as tools, so we have to like hack them together ourselves with like spreadsheets and API calls and stuff. So yeah, like usually we'll kind of mix that stuff together ourselves. Like we actually had like a team of 4 developers at Ladder that and a designer that basically just like built stuff for us based on what we needed. But I think that's completely not needed unless you're doing a lot of stuff at scale. And it is like actually, basically like the simpler you keep it, the less you have to worry about tools, right? And if you are doing really complex campaigns, then you do need some automation. Like Savannah was saying, like if you are testing thousands of ad creatives, nobody wants to do that work manually, right? So that's when you have to start getting into like, I don't know, machine learning to like identify what's in the ads, so you can tell like, I don't know, these types of ads working or those types of ads. That's the sort of stuff that you can do, which is becoming a lot more accessible now. Like one of the things we did actually, we moved away. Like one thing I would say is like don't build anything for yourself that already exists, because it's going to be like a nightmare to maintain, very expensive, and like that's not the business you're in, right? Like unless this is really really core to your business, you shouldn't build it in house. So like at Ladder, even though we built a load of stuff, like we moved. So these guys are the kitchen. Again, not affiliated, but like what they kind of did was like they're kind of like Zapier, but for ad management stuff, right? So you can kind of say like when this ad is not performing, then turn it off, or like send me a Slack alert if we're not hitting our target, that sort of stuff. So we actually like scaled back a lot of our our tech, and then just put it into that platform, because then it's like then they have to worry about maintaining it. So yeah, we actually we went through this phase of like building loads of stuff and then actually starting scaling it back and just using tools that are out there instead.
Cool. And then as a final question for you both, a lot of the folks in our audience, again, they are at startups and earlier stage startups. When's the right time to think about paid ads? Like, at what point in your life cycle as a business should you be thinking about going into paid as a growth channel for you? Is there anyone that maybe shouldn't be looking at paid growth at all and should be doing other things in your opinion? I'd love to get your POVs on that.
Sure. Well, I would say, as someone in the chat pointed out, like product market fit is of course the most important thing, and utilizing paid to prove that or disprove that is probably worthwhile at the start. Sometimes brands will hit me up for ads, and I'll go to their website, and the website is just terrible, like just bad fonts. It's slow, so poorly. It looks terrible. I can't, and I'll be on the website for a few minutes. I'm like, I don't even know what they're selling, and they're asking me like, help me with TikTok ads. I'm like, no, I need to go fix this, and this before you even start. So I would say like being honest with yourself and thinking like, am I ready for this? Like, does my website and my offer, my product show to the world? I think that's number one. And that's kind of what I look for when I'm taking on clients that are brand new. I'm like, okay, have you figured out the basics? Like, do you look legit? Do I know what you're selling? Does your website function? Because I'm surprised at the amount of people who come to me wanting ads and I can't even get their website to load or figure out what they're selling.
Yeah, for sure. Like I'm a little bit more rogue with that stuff. Like we did a bunch of stuff where we ran ads for products that didn't exist just to see if they should exist, right? So like I think that is like, I mean, you like the good thing about ads is like it's not like buying TV, right? Like you don't have to spend $5 million for a Super Bowl placement on day one. You can put like $10 a day on your credit card for a few weeks and to just see like generally like are people clicking on this, like which one of the 2 variations I was thinking about are working. So I think it's valid as like a way to quickly learn. As an actual acquisition channel, I would say usually it's just one of the like 4 major things. And there's a lot of businesses that never ever get like paid advertising working at scale. And like actually in every category, there's usually like one client that, or, you know, one business that like makes it in each channel, right? So travel, you have booking.com, who are like world class at paid ads, and like I think Google's biggest customer, right? And then but then you have like Airbnb, who turned off all their paid ads because they said that they didn't see any drop in revenue, right? You know, and is it because like booking.com are bad at attribution? No. Is it because Airbnb, you know, like it, you know, it's not because like paid ads doesn't work, right? It's just because Airbnb found like a, you know, their business is, you know, much better at virality and like affiliates and referrals and kind of like brand PR type stuff, right? And then you have like you know, TripAdvisor, right, which you know, or like Expedia, who dominate the organic search side of things, right? So I think usually like in every category, there's like one brand that does really well on SEO, you know, one brand that does really well on paid ads, one brand that does really well on virality, like kind of social stuff, organic social, and then one that does like really well on sales or like direct kind of partnerships and sponsorships. And so if the, like in your category, if there isn't someone in the paid ads bucket, then maybe there's an opportunity, right? But then you have to think about like, how can I change my business model to make paid ads work for me? Like, you know, like booking.com have, you know, thousands of people who you know, they like hire like rocket scientists, right, to do all these A/B tests and like change like everything about the website as well to make it convert on a short-term basis, you know. And they made very, very different design choices based on that than say Airbnb, where it's more about like unique properties and like you know, beautiful photos and things like that. So I would say, yeah, usually your business model decides whether paid ads will work for you or not.
Great. Savannah, where can folks find you online, get at you if they need some help on TikTok or the socials?
Of course, you can find me on my website, which is thesocialsavannah.com. My website also has my TikTok ads course. If you want to learn more about media buying on TikTok and creating great ads for TikTok, my course is the ultimate resource. So that's on thesocialsavannah.com. I'm most active on Twitter, which is social_Savannah. And then you can also find me on Instagram at thesocialsavannah.
And Michael, where can folks find out more about you and your book, Marketing Memetics, and, you know, nerd out on attribution?
Yeah. So yeah, my the book is Marketing Memetics. Yeah, it's marketingmemetics.com. Vex Power is what I spend most of my time on. Vexpower.com. That's a training platform where you can kind of actually learn a lot of this attribution stuff. And I make up fake companies for you to practice on. And give you the data. So like that's definitely worth checking out. And then if you just want to see me post random crap all day, then go on Twitter. I'm hammer_MT.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for your time today. I hope you found this to be valuable.